Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It's time to bring the orange with our guest today, Mr. John Owings. It's great to have you in studio.
I know, this is amazing. I really like this. This is really cool.
You've been commenting that you love the digs. You're in town for SE Boot Camp, which is super cool. So we're
refresh, we're calling it.
Refresh. But we are taking this opportunity to get you in here. You're a guest. You've been on the program before.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
love it.
And a longtime Puritan. I think the last time we had you on, we talked about some things from your 10-year journey here at Pure. But now you do everything all around Kubernetes, which is what we're going to dive into.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm even borrowing the title that you did for Accelerate last year for this episode, Kubernetes, Data, and AI, oh my, because it was so good. And there's a reason all those things
use that title again this year.
Fit together.
Maybe we'll use it again this year.
We could. Well, we had kind of a different one, but we'll kind of go with it. Well, what are you working on right now? You hail from Atlanta, and you're working on all things Kubernetes, even though you worked on FlashArray and other Pure products before.
Yeah.
Now you're doing everything Portworx.
Yeah, definitely. So, today I'm working with our strategic, so basically the Fortune 50 customers that are looking at Portworx. So working with all the teams globally on how to adopt Portworx and kind of a lot of the different use cases, some of the things we'll probably dive into a little bit today around AI and virtualization alternatives and like the good old containers and platform engineering. So we look at all those things.
I know, the platform engineering is interesting, but one of the things that did stand out when Pure acquired Portworx were some of the logos, right? Those were big names, right? That I remember going to the Portworx website and going, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like, these are some really significant enterprises that chose Portworx to make an investment for managing big Kubernetes environments, which generally get really complex and really strung out.
Yeah, definitely. And it's growing, right? With the combination with Pure, we're seeing more and more of those customers as they mature, right? Obviously, those, back in 2020 when we acquired Portworx, those were kind of the vanguards that we had.
They were dipping their toe in a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, and there were some that had been doing it for several years, but but now we see, some of those customers that are, the financial institutions, maybe the more conservative ones that are, they know that this is the way they have to go to really modernize where their workloads are being run.
Yeah. And you mentioned the growth, which brings us to, I'm doing a fanfare for that. For stat of the episode, and the stat that I pulled, I'm just kind of randomly to kind of draw you all in here, more than 60% of enterprises have adopted Kubernetes, right? And I think if we go back a few years, it's far fewer than that in a percentage. Yeah. And in the annual CNCF annual survey, shows adoption rates have increased to 96%.
Yeah, a lot of people are running it. I mean, even more. So, like, obviously there's that many running it, that many that are adopting it. And, we see more and more also in the production, right? That's the key stat is when you're running it to run your business, not just like, hey, we're using it to play around with.
Yeah, we're doing it for dev or something like that.
Now we're seeing more and more people run their production workloads that really run what they do.
And this across that spans, both enterprise apps and born in the cloud apps. I mean, it's the gamut, right?
It's a little bit of everything now. Right? It's not just the ephemeral, homegrown things that are scale out only. We're seeing SQL Server and Oracle. We're seeing the traditional databases end up in there because everyone's looking for like a way to kind of consolidate the management of that and do it in a platform that is more like the cloud, even if they're on-prem or in the cloud or everything at once. So we're seeing a lot of that.
There is a lot of that. And I think one of the other contrasts that I wanted to dig into, so we're now hitting the digging deeper segment, is the trend of containers relative to virtual machines.
Yes.
And I know you're very much a VMware guy, been in that community. And you notice I didn't say containers versus, or like there's different tools for different jobs, but with a lot of the changes that have gone on, I think there's a lot more people, a lot more enterprises looking at, okay, containers effectively kind of do what we need to do. They're lightweight, they're easy to spin up. We use them, then we spin them down. Is this a place we can go with some of our real estate as an alternative to a traditional virtual machine type environment?
Yeah, and there's not a day now that I don't talk about that.
All the time.
All the time, especially with these larger customers, because There, if you think, a commercial style customer, their renewal for that virtualization technology may have gone up a couple $100,000.
Yep.
You're talking to other customers where it's gone from 500 million to 1.5 billion with a B. And those are scary numbers that like I don't get to talk about ever, right?
Yeah.
And so they're like, hey, we need to have a way to move this. And so it's not so much converting those apps into containers now. It's I need to get the VM and run it in a place where I can have it for a while. So that's what we're doing with Red Hat OpenShift virtualization. Okay. So it's still a VM. It's still a VM, but now it's running under Red Hat, under KVM as the hypervisor, and it gives them a new landing spot, right? And it's really a migration that's helping these customers kind of de-risk what they're doing when it comes to their traditional provider, which it kind of opens up that lock-in that they were part of.
So you retain the education or the investment or the process around managing an environment using virtual machines, which again, people have built up for 10 or 15 years now, and there's knowledge around that and how that works. But now you're operating that in a different manner and maybe shifting to a different technology, right? That's a whole other episode.
Different managing
do.
Yeah, we could talk about it the whole time, but you just think about when you had mainframe.
Yep.
Converting those into open systems. It took a while. And so now they're hedging themselves until they can convert those into containers eventually. And maybe some of the stuff never changes.
Yeah.
Red Hat is fine with that. Portworx and Pure are good with that. Like, hey, we can manage the data either way and, protect it, keep it safe, all those things, and, get it there fast and performance and all the fun stuff that we do. But yeah, either one we can do, and that gives them the time to convert rather than kind of be in this bad situation where they're kind of paying for something that they want to get out of.
Yeah. Let's go back to you talk about containers every day. What's the scope of those conversations? What's the range? And kind of getting away, probably the VM thing comes up that we were just hitting on. But what's the average engagement if you're talking every day about people adopting or using or in production? Like, you get called in. Why would I call in JO to come in and chat, with me as a user, as a customer? I'm trying to figure out what to do.
Well, it's usually they're building a platform.
Okay.
They want to traditionally, hey, we have a platform we want to build that enable developers, which are probably one of the most expensive assets that any organization has, right? Especially at scale. When you have 10,000 developers, if they're sitting around, that's a lot of money.
Idle time is no good, right? Yeah.
So they want to build a platform that it's highly available, it is self-service, it's quick, it's and then it drives adoption. So that's kind of the new thing now is with platform engineering, at least how I interpret it, is they're building a product. It's internal, but they almost run it like a product manager and a product within the company. Like, hey, we gain adoption. We're measured against not so much you only spent this much on infrastructure and the developers are now faster. They actually have like up to, SLAs. Yeah. It needs to be up this long. It needs to have this much adoption, and it needs to be developed or delivered in a way that attracts the developers, because they don't require, they go, you know what, if that's not solving the need and we can get business value out of something else, they'll go do that.
Okay.
And so that's where, they have to actually compete internally to keep the interest of those resources, those developers, those people. So that's a big thing.
So avoiding idle time, but also ultimately what we're getting to is having those developers do useful things for the product, for the technology, typically it's for the application, right?
But rather than fighting infrastructure or fighting, how to create deployment files or how to log into the cloud and all the things that go along with that.
Yeah, have them spend time actually adding value to the business by putting features in that people want or fixing stuff, right? Often there's fixing bugs and fixing things. I mean, why are we constantly updating applications on our mobile devices, right? That's a prime example.
Well, it's on auto update now. I don't even know how many
times it updates. Yeah. I still have not put on auto update, and it drives my kid crazy. You still want to push the button 80 times? I go, yes, I do. I want to absolutely control what that is. Let's hit the next part I'm really interested in diving into, because you hit this last year at our Accelerate conference. We're going to have you do it again and update it this year. How is AI impacting what companies have been doing with Kubernetes? Or let me flip it around. How is Kubernetes weaving into what AI projects are being thrust upon organizations?
Yeah, I think a few years ago, like all the machine learning was done, especially it was built by data scientists, PhDs, and they were spending a lot of time fighting HPC, like the different kind of schedulers, the different infrastructure,
kind of
systems.
Legacy, right? Some of that
it's kind of a legacy way to do it,
right?
And what we see in the enterprise, they don't have time for that.
Okay.
And so Kubernetes is the default. And if you go talk to any of our like AI specialists that are on the Pure team, they will tell you like, hey, yes, it is all done in Kubernetes. So, OpenAI, even though they're using it in Azure, like that's all done with Kubernetes. And we see that it's basically it's the center of being able to do the development for AI, whether that is doing the training, the inference, RAG models, any of those kind of things. It's all built in containers. It's all running on top of Kubernetes. And the challenge that comes like, hey, how do I get data connected to it? How do I get GPUs connected to it? Because there's, it's not something everyone just grew up knowing. We're all learning it.
Very new, yes.
We're all learning it as we go. NVIDIA is providing lots of great tools, and the other chip providers are going to do the same. And, how do we provide that data? That's where I focus most of my time is like, hey, not all of it's training data. That's a key thing. But some customers are going to say, hey, you know what, Llama is already made. Yeah. I don't need to remake Llama. I can run that on-prem, and I can add my data to it. Right. And that's where we come in is we say, hey, that's on a FlashBlade or that's on Portworx, or we'll let Portworx actually manage it all.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the story that I told last year was while Kubernetes is the scheduler of where the workloads go, Portworx is the scheduler of where the data is.
Yeah.
Right. Whether that's on a FlashBlade, it's on an NVMe disk or on a flash array, wherever it's going to be, we're helping those developers get it faster because everyone's trying to figure out, how am I going to get value out of AI? And they're not all going to drop $100 million on like a giant room full of GPUs. They may start small. Like, how do we do this? How do we actually grow with it? And so they got to let the developers and data scientists experiment, build things, see where they can get value. And we were right in the middle of that. And Kubernetes is right in the middle.
And ultimately not getting bogged down with the challenges of infrastructure and how to find data and how to manage data and data being in silos and all those. Right.
And with no help, they're gonna try to build it themselves. Right. They're all very smart people. Yeah. They're gonna build it themselves. And 2 years later, they're gonna have something that was really good 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And they finally have it working, and you're gonna already be behind.
Yeah.
So we need to help them get there fast. That's really our goal.
So with the AI piece and what you're talking about relative to the data scientists and what we already touched on platform engineering, is there a coming convergence of those functions, or do they still live kind of separately because the AI folks are doing what they're doing with training models and other things, and the platform engineering really just focused on apps? Or is there some type of convergence? And again, I'm kind of forward looking here.
Yeah, you have those Venn circles, right?
Yeah, right.
And there's some overlap, but it's not completely converged, because I think like a lot of the workloads in the AI ML field is still very specialized.
Okay.
Now, there's going to be stuff in the middle. So you look at some of the databases that people run.
Yeah.
Right. You see Microsoft just released a new, version where you can basically put AI into SQL Server. Like, you're going to see more of those traditional apps that were, that would have probably been in that platform side now have AI-ish things in them.
The vectorized databases.
Why go use some open source vector database when you already know SQL?
Well, and your stuff lives over
just
here,
upgrade
right?
it and turn it on, right? Your data's already there, and now you can pipe that database straight into your RAG model, and you're ready to go. So it is there's some overlap, but I don't know. I think there's some things, especially when it comes to infrastructure, is that stuff is so expensive, and specialized. They want to make sure they can't just like build one magic cluster for everything. There's still going to be kind of
so that one's specialized for the AI part. Yeah, from an infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah, what's beautiful though is with Portworx, right, kind of being that data orchestrator layer and the data management, and things like FlashBlade and FlashArray, is we could sit in the middle.
Yeah,
and we can kind of provide, hey, you have your databases, taking transaction data over here from what's happening in the real world. We're taking all that data, and then without having to do a lot of work, right? Because we kind of break down those silos, we can now use that data to train the AI.
Well, we're getting to that pipeline thing, right? I mean,
exactly.
when I first joined here in 2017 or whatever it was.
Data hub, we called it. Right?
Yeah, they kind of sat me down and they said, well, here's this data hub thing where regardless of what your unstructured or object or file data is, it can go here. But even at that time, we were challenged on our team to create sort of an Oracle-looking environment around that, which said, oh, well, your traditional block and your structured stuff is here, and you've got FlashBlade. And what was missing really were a lot of the connectors that now are in place, right? The things that you can do with APIs or
Portworx
containers and with Portworx and the data management. We were just kind of ahead of our time based on what we were thinking about doing. But
you were visionaries. I'll call you visionary.
It was Axel. It wasn't me. He just said, go figure this thing out. And I was like, all right, well, we got 2 products. Let's figure it out. But to up level a little bit more, this is the value of the platform, right? And now you see why the Portworx acquisition made sense 3 or 4 years ago, kind of ahead of the time. And now you combine it with a really broad, robust portfolio, and you can attack these challenges with a platform of both really powerful infrastructure to manage the data, as well as the orchestration layer and the data. Well, let's go into Portworx. Portworx, not just one product, Portworx Enterprise and Portworx Data Services, backup, and it's pretty much everything you would want as a suite for managing Kubernetes.
Exactly, and it kind of, when you talk about that, I'm probably not supposed to touch the microphone.
That's all right.
But we'll live. It's that I get excited and my hands move.
No, I know. I do the handsy things too.
You're more used to it. You've been in here before. Is the big thing is that I think the AI workloads is where we're going to see that be a reality first, right? In a VM, you kind of have like, hey, VMs are really great on a block, transactional low latency system. And unstructured data goes into different places, and when we talk about like the breadth of what Pure Storage has become, when you talk about all the parts of the portfolio, is that AI workload is going to touch them all.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm really excited about. It's like you see that happening, and you're like, hey, I need data that's unstructured. I need data that is transactional. I need all of my file, all my PDFs, everything that I can put together, and I need to be able to access them all from one place. And we're seeing that come together the most, I think, in these AI environments.
Yeah, it's kind of forcing that, but also I think we've been on that trajectory with the array development, right? The notion now that there's really robust file on FlashArray, or just the proliferation of protocols across the devices, which then have different characteristics depending on what you're trying to achieve. And then even more interesting, we go into a whole jag about subscriptions, right? And like you take Portworx and then you take an Evergreen One type of approach to where you're just subscribing to what you need depending on the data type. And okay, let's say AI touches it all. Great. We're going to subscribe to that and just use what we need.
Yeah. And since I've been here almost 12 years. And I'm still excited.
Yeah.
Is what's awesome. Hopefully that's encouragement to everyone, you and everyone else around is like, hey, I still see some really cool things going on here at Pure. That's why I'm still here. Right. It's like, definitely there's some awesome things happening, and I see like the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be even more. So
it's a lot of good stuff ahead of you. Okay, now we're gonna hit our hot takes segment. I've been waiting for this. You're our first. You're our guinea pig on this. Are you looking over my show notes?
No,
so 12 years at Pure, but also plenty of time in IT prior to that, and we don't need to dig into that specifically. But what is a trend or shift right now in the industry that you think IT leaders should be paying more attention to? And if it's some of the things we've already talked about, that's okay too.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the big one is what to do with VMware.
Okay.
Like everyone's, I don't think there's anyone ignoring that though.
No.
When you say what they should be looking at is really how can we get a quicker way to AI? Like, I'm not going to rebuild ChatGPT, but how can I use models that are out there and look at the trends of, Hugging Face and Llama and Ollama and kind of those different tools that are out there, and start to see how you can leverage those to accomplish things that you're doing every day. It's not so much like, do I need to build another chat bot?
Yeah.
But like, how do I analyze even within IT things like logs or things like tickets? How do I see what's going on and take advantage of that to help make my job easier? Because I think for us is we're gonna see the best way to put this is, if we can't leverage that stuff, someone else will.
Right.
If we can't leverage those tools to our advantage, someone else will, and then we'll be obsolete.
Those are very good parallels. I did a webinar with Zach Cass, who's kind of an AI influencer guy, and we did one. It's part of our Engage series, and it's probably about 6 months ago from right around now. And he hit both of those areas as an AI kind of visionary that you touched on, which is really the build versus buy. Mm-hmm. Okay, there are certain things that are already out there, packages you can use. Don't waste time. Or like you said, go off and spend 2 years building something, and you'll have something that was really good when you started building it.
Yeah.
Right. And so he definitely touched on that. And the other was what you described as well, is just finding little wins, finding little places where you can make an impact. You have all this log data. What can you do to automate that?
And don't be afraid to share that with like your bot. Don't come up and be like, hey, look at all this cool stuff I learned, and then be ashamed that like I used the AI to find that out.
The AI?
The AI.
I get made fun of when I use the AI, but now I use it just to bother people.
Yeah.
They go, you sound so old saying the AI. And I'm like,
But I am.
The artificial intelligence, Yeah.
And so, we should say, hey, here's how we took advantage of this.
Yeah.
And instead of me going and spending 6 months crunching spreadsheets on my own, I was able to do this in a week. Right. And they're going to go, wow, man, you're pretty, you took advantage of that. Like you actually did that. You didn't just ask it like, what it had for breakfast or anything.
Well, here's all the other stuff I did while I was not crunching spreadsheets and doing
exactly.
Things as well.
That's one thing I can do. If I could get out of managing Google spreadsheets.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'll pay whatever subscription to whatever AI I have to.
Yeah. So. Yeah. The AI.
The AI.
Okay. Number 2, and this one's going to be fun, and stay tuned, viewers and listeners, because we're going to do a callback to this at the end where we want to hear from you. But I don't know how to couch this right. First time, I'll probably evolve this over episodes over time. But what's your favorite or what's your most memorable screw up or mess up with a customer or as an admin, right? I'm going to amend that because I know some people I bring on the show were practitioners at one time. But what's your favorite screw up story, and were you able to resolve it? And I have in parentheses on my show notes, everybody has one of these because
they always do. Like if you say, I've never screwed up, then
Yeah, I've never hit the I've never deleted a backup or what, that kind of thing.
So when I was an admin, before I moved into I worked for a partner and did services and stuff like that. Before I was a network admin.
Yeah.
And I applied an access control list to some routers and shut everything off.
So what happened? When that happened?
Like literally people like, the internet just stopped? And I was like, do. Like I rolled it back. And I was like, I was applying it, and I left a any statement off the end and, turned everything off. So I owned up to it. Okay. But I fixed it quickly. I knew what I did.
How long was it out? Was it?
Oh, like 5 minutes.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So it wasn't super.
It wasn't like I did it right before I went home on Friday.
Yeah, like the guy from Jurassic Park. Who just
off.
took off, right?
Yeah. No. But at Pure, one that we had, and this was back in the old days with the FA420, and we had all these SAS cables in the back of it. So you had like these SAS shelves, and the controllers were servers.
Yeah.
And we plugged it all in. It was all working for this customer. It was a hospital, and they were doing a POC. So there's no live data on this. So I wasn't going to affect any patient care or anything like that.
Fortunately.
Very fortunately. But we went in there to do a test, like like we do for all our POCs early in Pure, and we still do it today, I would guess, is pull a drive.
Wow.
Pull a drive or unplug a controller and see what happens. Well, I noticed one of the SAS cables looked a little loose, so I pushed it the rest of the way in, and it kind of did a reset of some kind of SAS thing on the back end. So we don't use any of this. Anyone's out there.
That was a while ago.
That's a long time ago. So none of that technology is in there. But some SAS, there's an identifier for SAS. When these things chain together, it triggered that and took all the drives offline. And this customer was livid. livid. He was screaming at support because everything went down, and I can't believe this. And I'm like, one, it's a POC.
POC.
But I have a secret. Like, I'm pretty sure he was doing live stuff on it when he wasn't supposed to.
Okay, it's possible.
But that's why he was so mad. But like, yes, it caused a big issue. We fixed it. We figured, and I learned a whole bunch about SaaS that day. And so we fixed it with support, and we made sure everything was good. Later, probably maybe 6 months later, after that customer had purchased it, he ended up walking on stage, not invited, going up on stage. And like, while Scott Dietzen, our old CEO, was talking to a Gartner analyst at a big, like, fancy dinner at a big fancy hotel in Atlanta. And he goes, y'all, I got something to say. And he comes up on stage and gets the mic and talks about how amazing Pure Storage was and how it's done so much for him and, you know, helped. And I was like, it was a big conversion from that day that we blew up that SaaS thing all the way to him inviting himself on stage to tell everyone his story, which was not planned. People still claim that I planned that, but I didn't. It
wasn't a plan.
No.
It just happened organically.
Yes.
Well, and a good testament to owning up to resolving it and then sticking with it and having persistence along the Pure values that we have here, being very persistent on that. That's a good one. That is a good one. All right. Hot take number 3. If you could go back 10 years, and you were here 10 years ago, since you said you're in year 12, which is incredible. You and Joe Reynolds, right?
Yep.
If you go back 10 years, what would you have told yourself about the data management space in the future?
So what I'm doing now, or?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, wow.
Was Kubernetes even really kind of a thing?
It was just brand new back then.
Brand new, right?
Just brand new back then.
Because I felt I heard more about like OpenStack.
Yeah, OpenStack and Docker.
Which is still around, OpenStack, Docker, but
Docker was a big thing.
Kubernetes was a very new, really weird thing.
Yeah, I think that if I could go back to, it was 2015.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what I was doing in 2015. We were,
You were doing the first Evergreen upgrade.
We were doing Evergreen upgrades. We upgraded a customer right in the middle of the day. We were still involved in that. I think I would have said, hey, right now you're up, in a data center, upgrading a FA420 to an M chassis, which was a big deal back then, live in the middle of the day. In 10 years, you'll be, it'll be awesome because you'll be talking to Rob on a podcast
it's pretty fun
about containers and things that you couldn't even imagine.
And you would have said, what's a container?
Yeah, I would have. Well, I'm like, is that like a VM?
Yeah, that's usually what we would have said back then. Oh, is that a VM?
Is that like a cheap VM or something? Yeah. But I mean, the places that we've come since then is amazing. But yeah, really, I would have said, hey, be ready for anything, and always be ready to learn.
Yeah,
and that's, I think, for me, I mean, I could have started that earlier.
But you did eventually. I remember when your role change came through, right? Because you were SE and kind of, technologist, FSA kind of thing. And then one day somebody just said, oh yeah, J.O.'s going to move over and work on Portworx, work on Kubernetes. And I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Well, thanks.
And you did have to learn it, right?
Yes.
I mean, there was a lot that you had to pick up to be able to come onto the pod now and talk as credibly as you do.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it would be, it wouldn't be so much of like change anything. Because I think like I've always had that kind of attitude of I want to learn stuff and do that. But it would be, hey, here, find other ways to share what you're learning. Because I think one thing that I would say back then I was doing more of is like definitely writing more about what I was doing, those kind of things. And I would love to do that more, but right now it's just like overwhelmed with things to put food on the table rather than
no it depends on the role, right? We'd all love to have more time to share and do those things, and
I feel like I get a lot of opportunities. I speak at conferences and those kind of things around what we're doing, and I get to come out to Accelerate, which I'm excited and thankful for. And so we'll see where we're going from there.
Great. No, it's good advice. Always keep learning, and it's actually one of the reasons I started the podcast many years ago, because I didn't really know what we did here. And it was an easy way for to bring people on and
you get to know all kinds of people.
It forced me to go off and kind of learn and write an outline so I knew what the heck I was talking about when I brought people on. Okay, last call. Key takeaways for, and again, there's a long range, right? There's people that, like you said, are just getting started in Kubernetes or doing things in non-prod environments. There's those that are super mature. But what's your advice for, and I'll reframe this from what I had written, what's your advice for people to have more success with their containers environments and particularly around that platform engineering function?
For more success, I would say is that be willing to do things that are outside of what you thought containers were 6-7 years ago.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? I still run into people that are like, hey, we have our way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to containers, when it comes to cloud native, it's a whole new mindset. So I almost wish like we could throw out some of our experience when it comes to those things. Like this is how we did VMware.
Yeah.
This is how we did, Oracle RAC. This is how we did SQL Server. Hey, the way things scale at a machine level, like this is, we're now talking about like how to manage things really using code and machines instead of manually picking and choosing is way different. We need, and I think a lot of people are really good at that. But I would say if you're new into it, is like, hey, let's not try to force our old way of thinking on it, and see what you can learn, and see if there's a way to kind of develop a new pattern with what you need to accomplish, and start with. And it's how I ask customers all the time, because they'll come up and be like, hey, can you do this X, Y, and Z feature? Well, what are you actually trying to get done?
Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one for the Puritans listening, right, is that we should ask that why.
You should.
More often.
All the time.
But I think when the customers start asking themselves why am I doing it this way? Right. There's going to be a lot more innovation, a lot more value to whoever we're working for. So that would be my thing.
Great advice, actually. I like that, because we do tend to get bogged down with the way we've always done things. Mm-hmm. And for those of us that have been around in IT and infrastructure for a long time, so we've just gotten used to, this is how we upgrade something. This is how we develop something. This is how we operate. And containers really forces you to rethink those things and look at it from a different perspective. I love that. That is really great. Thank you for that. And thank you for coming on today. An absolute blast. And thank you for sharing your storage confession. We want to hear from you. Storage confessions. Yeah, that's the name that we're going with for that. Send yours to purereport@purestorage.com. And again, it's tied back. You heard John's story here about his mess up. You can just leave your name and maybe last initial. You don't have to give us a company. We won't share that, but on a future episode, we'd love to pick one of those and to share a storage confession that you send into us. Thanks, man, for coming on here.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I was glad you were in town for this. It was really perfect. Find John on LinkedIn. Anywhere else? Probably on the LI. That's about the main one.
LinkedIn. I guess it's called X, although I don't use that very much anymore. Okay. But LinkedIn's probably, John Owings, no H.
Yep.
You'll find me. There's a picture of me with some funny glasses on.
There is a picture there. Yes, outstanding. And look for him at many of the events that we show up at around Kubernetes containers and Pure in general. Thank you for that. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of the Pure Report. As always, tell a friend, tell a colleague, and we will keep the great guests like J.O. coming on to the program. With that, we will wrap for Pure Storage and John Owings. This is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.